I've always enjoyed driving along the Pacific Coast Highway at night. There's something hypnotic about the combination of dark ocean on one side and cliffs on the other. That particular night, I was hauling a light load of parts to Santa Cruz. There was little traffic, clear skies, and not much wind, the kind of night that makes you forget how tired you are. It was on one of these more remote stretches, around 2 a.m., that I began to see a blue glow appearing beneath the cab. Faint at first. I thought it was some light reflecting off the dashboard or the radio buttons. But when I looked closer, I saw that it was coming from the ground. I thought I was passing through some kind of sensor patch, like the ones under the asphalt in controlled areas. But this was different. The blue light was fluid, as if it were moving beneath me. I shifted the angle of the side mirror and got a better look, a thin mist, blue, vibrating like plasma, creeping beneath the truck. My first instinct was to slow down, stop, take a picture, try to understand. But something made me keep going. This wasn't natural. There was too much movement. As I drove on, the light grew brighter. It became more intense on curves and disappeared for a few seconds on straights. But at a certain point, I felt a slight, different vibration in the rear axle. As if something was touching underneath. I thought it was a suspension problem. I looked in the rearview mirror, and then came the worst, shadows. Multiple. Elongated. Trying to cling to the structure beneath the load. They weren't the shadows of rocks or animals. They were shapes, humanoid, but distorted. As if they were trapped in that blue light, trying to climb up. I accelerated. Hard. And the light reacted. It began to shine even brighter, as if it sensed that I wanted to escape. The entire cabin had a blue reflection inside, like the light in an aquarium. The shadows writhed, their arms stretching toward the axis. I heard a sharp sound coming from below, like iron being scraped. It felt like something was trying to get in through the floor. And the weirdest thing, the radio, which was off, came on with a frequency that only emitted muffled whispers. As if the road itself were talking. I thought about stopping, but the blue light surrounded me from below. It was like a living layer. I tried to pull the truck closer to the inside of the lane, but the light adapted, as if molding itself to my movement. It felt like the truck was no longer on the ground, as if it were being suspended lightly by this luminous mist. The shaking in the steering wheel got worse. And when I looked in the right mirror, I saw one of the arms, long, dark, actually touching the edge of the trailer. As if it were trying to claw its way through. At that moment, I started praying quietly. I don't even know what. Anything to keep myself focused. I tried to change lanes, even though no one was coming. The light dimmed for a few seconds, but then came back. Brighter. And what really screwed me was the reflection. In the side window, I saw my face, and behind me, for less than a second, a pair of blue eyes shining inside the cabin. It wasn't my reflection. It was in the passenger seat. But when I turned my head, there was nothing. Just the sound of the road and a shiver running down my spine. I kept driving without stopping. I was in automatic mode. Each curve seemed tighter, each stretch quieter. And the light didn't disappear. It wasn't just coming from below anymore. It was as if the fog was entering the bodywork and trying to climb up the chassis itself. I started to hear a dripping sound, but it wasn't coming from outside. It was inside the cab. I looked at the ceiling, and there was no water. But I could feel the air getting more humid, like steam coming from inside the cabin. And the sensation in my feet, again, as if something was slipping under the floor. A brake warning light came on the dashboard. For no reason at all. The truck had been serviced less than a week ago. It was as if the systems were going haywire. The radio hissed louder. And it was at that exact moment that the truck lost power for 2 seconds. Just 2. But it was enough to see in the mirror, shadows spreading across the asphalt. As if they had been thrown out. One of them stopped under a light pole on the highway, and I saw a clearly human silhouette, but with the arms turned the wrong way. I don't know how I managed to keep the truck steady. All I wanted to do was get out of that section as quickly as possible. I passed the big creek overlook and then the intersection of 1 and 236. The blue light started to fade after that. Like it had a limit. When I saw the first gas station with a lit sign, I went straight in. I parked crookedly, jumped out of the cab with the engine still running. Below the cab, nothing. No lights. No signals. No sounds. But the ground still felt warm. And damp. I waited a few minutes before turning everything off. A truck driver who was there came over to chat. I asked him if he had ever seen anything strange on the coast at night. He paused, took a bite of his sandwich, and said, "If you saw the blue light, it's because it wanted you to see it." That chilled me more than any shadow. I didn't say anything else. I slept inside the cab, with the flashlight on and the radio unplugged. I woke up 3 times with the feeling that the truck was moving by itself. But I never saw anything. The next day, I took the truck to the garage. I insisted on having the underside inspected. The mechanic said he found strange marks on the rear axle. It was as if someone had scraped their nails around it. But there was no damage from the collision, and no sign that I had driven on a dirt road. I showed him the footage from the rear camera. The part with the blue light was simply missing. It was cut off. The footage skipped straight from before to after. And the file was automatically named blue_error_01. Since then, I have avoided driving on the Pacific Coast Highway in the early hours of the morning. I hear similar stories from other drivers, but almost no one talks about it out loud. They say that if you see the light once, you can see it again. Sometimes brighter. Sometimes, from inside the cabin. And I don't know how long it will be until she tries to get in again. Through the floor. Or through the mirror. I've crossed the Sierra Nevada many times, but it was on that particular night in October that I felt something really wrong with the truck. I was on the road around 10 p.m., heading out of Reno toward Bakersfield, hauling a load of electrical equipment. The ride was uneventful up to a point, but around 2 a.m., on a long climb near Donner Pass, the clutch pedal started shaking. At first I thought it was a fluid problem or a problem with the clutch plate, a common occurrence in older trucks. But within minutes, the shaking became too much. It was as if someone, or something, was pounding underneath the pedal, trying to push it up, like a punch coming from the floorboard. It wasn't the normal vibration of a bad road. It was irregular, loud, and it only happened when I stepped on the pedal. With each gear change, I felt a sharp jolt, as if something down there was reacting to the movement. I pulled over to a rest area, flashlight in hand, and went to check underneath. Nothing. No leaks, no rust, no sign of a loose part. But the ground seemed to be hotter than usual. I got back in the seat, started the engine, and as soon as I put my foot on the clutch, the sound started. It was a metallic click, like a chain hitting iron. And it only lasted as long as the pedal was pressed. But in that silence of the mountains, with no traffic nearby, the noise seemed to be coming from inside the cabin. Even with the door closed. Things got weirder when I tried to record it with my cell phone. The audio only picked up static during the sound. Everything else was normal. But that specific moment disappeared. I decided to continue my journey, but with a lighter foot. The road was empty, dark, and the temperature outside had dropped quickly. The windows began to fog up, even though the temperature difference was not that great. And the pedal was vibrating on its own now, even without touching it. Just by putting my foot near it, it moved slightly. As if it recognized the presence. As if it was waiting. The truck's radio crackled. And out of nowhere, a voice whispered something incomprehensible. It happened so quickly that I almost thought it was my head. But the pedal shook violently in the same second. After that, I started noticing other things. The clutch would respond late, as if it were being fought over. Like, you step on it and feel another force pulling it back. The gears would grind, even with the right RPM. And every now and then, would hear a sharp thud, coming straight from the floor, like a blow from a fist. A little before Truckee, when I was going to slow down on a tight curve, I felt the pedal get stuck in the middle, and at that moment, the truck jerked on its own, as if someone had shifted into the wrong gear. I parked at the first gas station I found. It was small, with only one pump working and a garage attached to it with a dim fluorescent light. I woke up the mechanic on duty, a gentleman wearing a cap and looking unfriendly. I explained briefly. He climbed into the cab with me, started the engine, and when I pressed the pedal, the noise came back. But this time louder. 3 knocks. Clear. He looked at me sideways, turned everything off and got out. He didn't say anything. He just walked back to the counter and said, "Sorry, mate. I don't mess with stuff that tries to get out of where it shouldn't." I stood there for a few seconds, not knowing what to do. I asked him what he meant by that. He simply replied, "If you can hear the noise coming from below, but there are no loose parts, then maybe it's not a part." He offered me a coffee, but told me not to spend another night there. That was all he said, and he went back to his room. I was unsure whether to sleep there or go straight there. The vibration in the pedals seemed to get stronger by the minute, even with the truck turned off. And I swear that at one point, I saw the pedal move by itself. I climbed back onto the bench, took a deep breath, and decided to keep going. I just wanted to get out of the mountains. It was either that or stay there listening to the tremors all night. As soon as I put my foot on the clutch to start the engine, I felt something cold and damp coming from the floor. As if the pedal was sweating. The gear shifted with difficulty, but it did. I put it in gear and went. In the mirror, I saw the gas station falling behind me, and the pedal shook again. But now, in addition to the vibration, there was a thin creaking sound, like metal bending inside. It wasn't the sound of wear. It was the sound of movement. I managed to get through the rest of the stretch, but without any peace of mind. At each stop, the pedal became worse. At one point, it would go down on its own, even without pressure. As if something was pulling from below. When I finally got to a larger gas station, with a certified mechanic, I asked them to disassemble the entire system. They agreed, until they heard the noise. One of the guys put a contact microphone on the floor and went blank. He said he had picked up rhythmic beats. As if something was living between the chassis and the cabin. They opened the lower compartment. Nothing. No cracks, no loose parts, no trapped animals. But they found marks on the insulation, like fingers marked from the inside out. Long. The tips were missing. As if they had been cut off. The chief mechanic closed everything up and told me I should change trucks. Or at least change pedals. He laughed. But it was a nervous laugh. Since then, I've only driven with my boot resting on the side, without touching it. Even so, sometimes the pedal shakes. As if it missed it. The strangest thing happened 2 weeks later. I was already far away, on a different route, but with the same truck. I pulled into a gas station in Bakersfield and went to sleep. In the middle of the night, I woke up to the sound of something tapping lightly on metal. 3 times. I went to check. Nothing outside. When I got back in, the clutch pedal was slightly pressed. Not all the way down, just a little. And my flashlight illuminated a spot on the carpet just below it. It looked like some kind of dark slime. Cool to the touch. Nowadays, I don't use that truck anymore. But sometimes I dream about it. Always at night. Always going up the mountain. And in the dream, the pedal never goes back in place. It stays pressed the whole time, slowly sinking, until it reaches the bottom. And from there, someone starts to get out. Someone who just needs a push. Or an old clutch, vibrating at the wrong time. I've driven US Route 2 more times than I can count. It's a long road, cutting across the northern United States, and the Montana stretch has always had a strange feel to it. Very flat, with big skies, and almost no footholds at night. It was early fall, and I was heading east, near Le Havre, when I saw something I didn't recognize, a police station on the side of the road. It was well lit, with 2 old vehicles parked in front, 1960s models, like Ford Galaxies. I thought it was some kind of themed museum. But it wasn't. I was tired, so I took the opportunity to stop and stretch my legs. As soon as I got out, I felt a heavy silence in the air. No wind, no crickets, no sound. The police cars were intact, but with old, worn-out license plates. I walked to the entrance of the building and was greeted by an officer in an old uniform, a classic hat, and a badge that seemed to be from another time. He looked at me as if he already knew me. He smiled slightly and asked, "Do you need help with the truck?" His voice was low and drawling. And the radio inside their cabin was playing old music, like from the 50s. I explained that I had only stopped to rest and that I thought it was strange that I hadn't seen the station before. He nodded slowly and said, "Not everyone sees it." The way he said it gave me goosebumps. I tried to start a conversation about the police cars, but he looked away, as if he didn't want to get into that. The inside of the building seemed frozen in time, yellowed paperwork, rotary phones, and the smell of old mold. I asked if there was a bathroom. He pointed down the hallway and said, "Right there. Second door." As I walked, I felt like the place was much colder than it should have been. As I left the bathroom, I passed through a half-open door and saw a room with several old photos of road accidents. All in black and white. Some of them were of trucks, others of police cars. In one of them, there was a truck identical to mine. Same paint job. Same number on the cabin. The detail that stopped me in my tracks was the scene in the photo. It looked like the stretch of road I had driven down an hour earlier. There was wreckage, smoke and a body covered in a tarp. I felt a tightness in my chest. I went back to the reception desk faster, but the police officer was no longer there. And the radio, now it was just making noise. I stood there, unsure whether to wait or leave. The front door was still open, but outside now looked different. The road was darker, as if the lights in my truck's cab were off, and I was sure I'd left them on. I ran back, but when I opened the passenger door, the dashboard was blank. No power. And for a moment, I thought I'd been mugged, or that I'd dozed off and dreamed the whole thing. Until I heard the gas station door open behind me. I turned around to see, and the officer was there again, standing at the entrance. But there was something wrong with him. His face seemed paler, his skin a little grayish, and his eyes, without much shine. He didn't come down the steps. He just stood there, looking at me. And he said in a very calm, almost affectionate tone, "You died here too, didn't you?" My body froze. Literally. My throat went dry. I tried to speak, but all I could do was shake my head slowly, as if to deny it. Then he just smiled, the same way as before, and said, "Most people take a while to accept it." At that moment, the police car's lights came on by themselves. Not the headlights, those rotating red and blue lights, flashing intermittently. And that's when I realized there was no more sound from the road. No cars passing by, no trucks in the distance, no wind noise, nothing. The world seemed suspended. I climbed back into the cab on impulse, just wanting to get out of there. I tried to start it, and this time the engine responded. Weakly, as if it were coming from far away, but it responded. The lights came back on. And when I looked back at the gas station, it was gone. The entire structure was gone. There was just a flat patch of ground, half gravel, with no sign of construction. No tire tracks. No police cars. Nothing. It was as if I had imagined it all. But the picture, the damn picture of my truck on the wall, was still vivid in my head. I drove for another hour without stopping. It wasn't until I reached a well-lit, busy rest stop that I could breathe properly. I asked at a roadside cafe if anyone there knew of an old police station in the area. The attendant looked at me strangely and said, "The only one there burned down in 1966. They never rebuilt it." I tried to forget about it, to move on with my life. But 3 weeks later, I stopped at a convenience store in North Dakota and an older truck driver started talking. I told him briefly what I had experienced, without giving too many details, and he was quiet for a while. Then he said, "You've seen the old gas station, right?" I froze. He continued, "We hear about it. Always on US 2, always at night, and always with a cop who doesn't talk much. They say he only shows up for people who are already on the wrong side of the road." I asked, "Which side is that?" All he said was, "The side you can't come back from." I don't know if I believe in life after death anymore. Or if maybe that was just some kind of warning, a crack in time. But there are nights when I dream about that officer's face. About that smile. And whenever I cross Montana, I avoid going that way. I turn around, I change my route, I even cancel a delivery if necessary. Once, I did a test drive and drove through that stretch again. Just a quick glance. And for less than 3 seconds, I saw the blue and red reflection spinning, but there was no vehicle on the road. What really haunts me is remembering what he said. "You died here too, didn't you?" And the way he said, "too," as if he was certain others had come before. Or that I was just coming back. I don't know if it was a time lapse, a memory from another life, or a chance to start over. But ever since that night, I've never felt completely alone in the cabin. The radio crackles in the early hours. The GPS freezes when I get close to certain landmarks. And sometimes, when the road is deserted, I hear footsteps on the gravel. Whether it was real or not, I don't know. But every time I cross the Montana state line, I turn down the volume. And I look twice in the rearview mirror. Every time I drive down CA 99 toward Bakersfield, the air changes. It gets thicker, kind of oily, like the heat has a taste. I'm used to the dry climate there, but that Thursday night, something seemed off. I turned on the air conditioning to indoor mode because the wind outside was strange. It smelled like burning rubber mixed with something more metallic. I didn't see the black dust blowing in. I only noticed later that the dashboard started to get opaque, as if it were being coated with very fine soot. I stopped the truck at a small gas station just outside the city and tried to clean the dashboard with a damp cloth, but the dust returned within minutes. It seemed to come from the air itself. It was dark but light, almost floating, and had a strange shine under artificial light. At the time, I thought it was common dirt from an industrial area, so I didn't pay much attention to it. The problem started when I went to sleep. I woke up in a cold sweat, my heart racing, remembering a dream that seemed more like a memory than a nightmare. In the dream, I was inside the cabin, but I couldn't get out. Everything outside was on fire. The windows were fogged up on the inside, and the heat was coming from the ground, as if the entire engine had exploded. I could see the flames in the rearview mirror, only instead of moving like normal fire, they were shaking. As if they were dancing in time with the wrong beat. And in the middle of the fire, I heard banging on the glass. Was it someone outside, or inside? I woke up gasping, and then came the part that really scared me. My right arm was on fire. And there was a red mark on it, shaped like the outline of the door. I thought I had touched something hot. But nothing in the cabin was abnormally hot. And the mark was very precise. As if it had been printed. I tried to forget about it and continue my journey, but in the following hours I began to feel slower. As if I hadn't slept at all. And the dust? It was still there. Even though the air filter had been changed the month before. On the dashboard, on the steering wheel, even on my collar. And worse, now I could see small black particles in my own breath. As if I were breathing ash. I drove for another couple of hours, trying to keep my head cool. But every time I blinked, flashes of that dream came back. The cabin on fire. The glass shaking. And, strangest of all, my own voice shouting my name, as if I were listening from outside. The CB radio, which was turned off, suddenly crackled with a low hum, and for a few seconds, it sounded like someone breathing deeply on the other side. I turned everything off again, closed the air vents, but the dust kept appearing. Only now, on the mirror, too. As if the cabin was fogging up inside, even with the air conditioning off. It seemed impossible, but every time I got closer to Bakersfield, more dust. More fatigue. I began to suspect that it wasn't the road. It was the air, from a specific place. A specific time. At the last stop before the city, at a gas station near Gosford, I tried to wash my face. And when I looked in the bathroom mirror, behind my shoulder, I saw something flashing orange. Was it the reflection of the truck, or was it fire coming from inside? I ran. The truck was fine. But on the ground next to the passenger side, there were ashes scattered like someone had left a fire burning there. I went back to sleep that night, more out of exhaustion than desire. And the second dream was worse. I was inside a warehouse. It was the same truck, same license plate, but the place looked abandoned. Cracked cement floor, tin roof, everything covered in the same black dust. Around the cabin, bodies of other drivers. Burned. Some still in position at the wheel, others halfway out the door. All with the same red mark on their arm, exactly where mine was still burning. I woke up breathless. And my mattress was covered in fine soot. As if I had slept on the floor of a warehouse. The next day, I went to a specialized garage just to check if there was a problem with the ventilation system. The mechanic opened the panel, looked at it for a few minutes, and asked, "Have you had any industrial fires recently?" I said no. He replied, "Because this isn't normal dust. It looks like ash from burned organic material. And it's coming straight from the duct." He showed me the filter, completely black. Like coal. I asked to change it, of course, but he just looked at me seriously and said, "I can change it, but if it keeps coming in, there's not much we can do." I made the switch and continued my journey, but the mark on my arm remained. It was already darker, like a second-degree burn in the healing phase. I never felt any direct pain, just a constant sensation of heat there, as if something was still active. The dreams came back the following nights. Always about fire. Always with the cabin closed. And on one of them, I heard someone whisper my name very close to my ear. When I turned around, it was me. Me, completely charred, with my eyes still open. The worst part was when I stopped at a gas station and started talking to another truck driver. I mentioned the strange dust in Bakersfield. He was quiet for a while and then asked, "Did you have a dream about a fire?" When I confirmed it, he showed me his arm. Same mark. Same place. He said he thought it was an allergy, but that the filter on his truck started releasing ash 3 days after the first stop in that area. He now avoids that stretch completely. He said he knows 3 other drivers with the same story. All with the same burns. Since then, I've been doing everything I can to avoid it. Even if it means taking huge detours. But every time I get close to the area, the air seems to change. The soot starts slowly, in the corner of the windshield. The smell comes later. And the worst part is that now, even from far away, I sometimes wake up with the feeling of being locked in the cabin again. With smoke rising from the floor. With something scraping its nails on the inside of the door, trying to get out. And when that happens, the mark starts burning again. Maybe that's not just dust. Maybe it doesn't come from the ground. Maybe it's what's left of something that never stopped burning. And maybe, just maybe, part of me is still there. It was after a delivery in Gallup, New Mexico, that it all started. I remember the weather was dry as usual, but the next morning, when I climbed into the cab to continue my journey, I saw a wet footprint on the brake pedal. I was barefoot. I thought it was strange, because I only drive in thick boots, and I couldn't do that even if I wanted to. I thought it was sweat or some kind of crazy condensation. I wiped it off with a dry cloth and went on with my day. But the next day, the footprint was there again. Same shape. Same place. I was wondering if it wasn't some kind of dirt inside, like grease or something dripping from the dashboard. But I started to notice that the mark only appeared in the morning. It was always fresh. As if someone had left their foot there overnight. And the weirdest thing, the footprint wasn't human in the normal sense. It only had 3 toes. Wide, as if they had suction cups or claws on the tip. And the heel seemed more rounded. I took a picture and sent it to a friend who works in heavy maintenance. He replied, laughing, "It looks like a swamp animal, man." I started cleaning more carefully, using alcohol and even disinfectant. Nothing worked. Every morning, the footprint would come back. Sometimes, I thought it was bigger. As if it had grown over time. I started sleeping with the cabin door locked from the inside, the alarm activated and a flashlight turned directly on the dashboard. It didn't work. The alarm never went off, but the mark always appeared. One night, I left the camera on my cell phone recording the pedal while I slept. The video stopped at 3:17 a.m. And when I came back, the footprint was already there. Wet. The feeling inside the cabin also began to change. The air became more humid, even with the dry desert climate outside. I began to smell a metallic smell, like wet rust. And one morning I woke up with the sole of my boot freezing cold. As if something had touched it while I was sleeping. I can't explain it, but it was as if another foot had pressed the brake on top of mine. From then on, every time I used the brake, I felt a slight delay, as if the pedal was being shared with someone else. After a few days of not being able to sleep properly, I started to avoid driving at night. But it only took one late night, coming back from Las Cruces, for things to get worse. The road was empty, the sky was clear. As I went around a tight curve, I felt the pedal lock up. As if someone was pressing it with me. I pressed harder, and felt resistance. I almost crashed. And at that moment, I swear, I saw out of the corner of my eye a figure bent over the carpet on the driver's side. Something low, leaning against the pedal. When I looked straight ahead, there was nothing. Just the footprint, newly formed. I tried to convince myself that it was just fatigue, road paranoia, those things we learn to ignore. But then the smell started to become unbearable. It wasn't just rust. It was a musty, stagnant smell. Like the smell of an abandoned well. And the worst part, it only came from under the dashboard, right at the pedals. It sounded like something was breathing in there. With each brake, there was a wet smack, as if the pedal had fabric, you know? As if it wasn't just metal anymore. I took the truck in for inspection. I didn't mention any footprints or smells, of course, I just asked them to check the pedals and the brake system. The mechanic thought it was strange that the brakes had a slight looseness, but he said everything was working. The funny thing was when he took off the rubber mat. The mark was there. Firm. Imprinted directly on the floor of the cabin, as if it had been burned or steam-printed. He looked at it, frowned, and said, "Have you been getting this inside wet?" I shook my head. And he just shook his head slowly and said, "Well, this shouldn't be like this." At the end of the inspection, he suggested replacing the carpet. I accepted, even though I didn't think it would help. That night, I parked safely at a well-lit gas station, slept with the interior lights on, and locked everything again. I woke up to the sound of the alarm. It was 3:22 a.m. I got out, a little dazed, and checked everything. No one. Nothing forced. When I got back to the cabin, the footprint was already there. Only this time, it wasn't just one. There were two. One on the brake and another further to the right, as if someone had tested the accelerator too. That's when I realized things were moving forward. The presence, whatever it was feeling more comfortable. As if it had gotten used to coming in. The second mark was smaller, but had the same bizarre shape, 3 wide, rounded, wet fingers. I tested the camera again. This time, I positioned 2 of them, with the flashlights pointing straight at the floor of the cabin. Both recordings stopped at exactly 3:19 a.m. The lights turned off by themselves. When they came back on, there was a third mark. On the passenger's carpet. I began to avoid sleeping in the cab. I made short stops, taking naps in public areas or at 24-hour restaurants. But even during these quick breaks, the footprints would return. Once, after a heavy stretch on US 380, the tracks were dry but smelled like salt water. Another time, after the truck had been off for nearly a day, the brake pedal felt softer, as if someone had been using it several times. It was as if whatever was leaving the tracks was learning how to drive. The final straw was when I had to stop abruptly in an emergency. A car crossed without a signal, and I stomped on it. The pedal stuck again, but this time, it went back up on its own. As if a second foot was there. The truck stopped inches from crashing. And in that second, with the interior lights still on, I clearly saw the wet mark forming on the inside of the pedal. The pressure in the cabin was suffocating, the smell stronger than ever, and I swear I heard a low whisper coming from the floor. A wet, guttural sound. Almost like a laugh. These days, I stay away from New Mexico. I've replaced the carpet, the pedals, even the cab. Nothing has worked. The mark appears on every truck I drive. Always at 3 a.m. Always wet. And more, I feel the brake responding before I step on it.